Now, while debating and discussing the flat Earth theory with many people, including several with degrees in physics and science and so on and so forth, um, and inquiring as to why what we see does not match the spherical geometry uh, of things disappearing over the horizon as they should, according to the math. Now, the reason that I have been given primarily is that uh, gravity actually bends light. So the light that we're seeing is bending around the Earth, the curvature of the Earth, so we can't really believe our eyes uh, because the what we're seeing doesn't match reality due to the gravity bending the light. So I decided I needed to find out a little more about gravity. I always thought that gravity was the attraction of one mass to another, and light doesn't have a mass. So how is gravity bending light? So I looked first at Newton's theory of gravity, and he did some great work on the laws of motion and this sort of thing. But he never did get a good bead on gravity. He thought, okay, we've got a mass, and one mass pulls against another mass, but according to his laws of motion, for every action there must be an equal and opposite reaction, and he felt like things had to be pushed, not pulled, and the pull of a mass against another mass should also have a push somewhere, just like a horse pulling a cart. The pull of the cart is a reaction of the horse pushing against the ground, so to speak. So he never finished the equation, and the scientific community just kind of let it ride. They needed gravity to hold everybody to and everything to Copernicus's round ball, and they needed it for the Earth to orbit the sun, and so on and so forth. Um, but along came the Michelson-Morley experiment hundreds of years later, and what they were trying to do with this was to prove how fast the Earth was spinning and how fast it was rotating around the sun, and so on and so forth. They wanted an experiment to show how fast this was happening. So they assumed that light traveled through this substance known as the ether. And the reason they postulated that this ether had to exist was this: if you say put an alarm clock in a clear vacuum chamber and you suck all the air out while that alarm clock is ringing, once the air is all gone, you can't hear any sound anymore because the sound waves don't have any medium, any air to travel through. However, they also noticed that when they pulled that vacuum on there and the sound disappeared, the light didn't disappear. They didn't have a jar of dark. So the light had to be traveling through something other than air. And the assumption was that these light waves were traveling through the ether. So the Michelson-Morley experiment came along, and they decided, okay, we're going to split a beam of light, run these two individual beams of light that we've split from, run them around this circuit of equal distance, bring them back together uh, onto a photocell, and since the Earth is spinning and moving and all this kind of stuff, it would cause more resistance in one direction than the other, uh, and they should get an oscillation of frequency, if you will, in the waves of light. Uh, so they did this experiment. They turned it every which way that you could possibly turn it to discern the movement of the Earth. And over and over and over again, they found that they didn't detect any motion. No motion of the Earth whatsoever. It was completely still. So the scientific community kind of went into a panic at this point, and in comes Einstein's general theory of relativity. E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. And Einstein uh, said, okay, there's no ether. Mainly the reason he said there was no ether was because his equation failed for acceleration of the light going through this ether. So that also explained away the Michelson-Morley experiment. He said, okay, the light sometimes it travels in waves, and there's nothing to travel in waves with. It travels in particles, and when it travels in particles, there's not going to be an oscillation of the light waves, and the Michelson-Morley experiment's not going to work. So the scientific community loved this. Now they still got their little spinning ball. It's still flying around through space, and they've got this general theory of relativity with time space and warpage into time space, making grooves for all the planets to travel in and orbit around and all this good stuff. But there was another experiment called the Sagnac experiment, and what this did was it was essentially the same as the Michelson-Morley experiment, except they rotated the table. And instead of trying to discern how fast the Earth was spinning, they decided to use this to discern how fast the table was spinning. And lo and behold, they found an oscillation in the frequency just exactly as they had predicted, and could predict the speed of the table turning by the oscillation in frequency of the two light waves of the split beam of light that was going around that circuit. So this changed a lot of things. This is why you don't hear the Sagnac experiment spoken of in physics classes and science classes. And this is a very important experiment. They actually use the Sagnac effect in the gyroscopes, the fiber optic gyroscopes that are used in airplanes and ships and rockets, for that matter. But what this proved was, number one, there was an ether. Number two, the Michelson-Morley experiment proved that the Earth is completely stationary. And number three, it proved that Einstein's theory of general relativity was null and void because it failed for light accelerating through the ether. So there you go. If you don't have good enough bead on what the cause of gravity is, I have a hard time believing that you can tell me, that anybody can tell me, that it's bending light, and that kind of reminds me of the old Groucho Marx joke. Who are you going to believe, me or your own eyes? Well, I'm going to believe my own eyes because nobody in the scientific community can prove that there's any reason for me not to believe my eyes. So there you go. The only scientific experiments that have been made to prove that the Earth was spinning have failed. The only other one that I know of is called the Aries failure. And the Aries failure was basically they were trying to determine whether the Earth was moving or the stars were moving. And they, again, considered the ether as being a fact, and they figured that if the light was going through the ether and hitting the Earth, and the Earth was spinning, that you would have to, if you fill that same telescope with water, the resistance of the water would make you have to tilt that telescope a little bit farther for the light to reach the lens and still see that same star. However, what it proved was that you didn't have to tilt the telescope, and that the 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 light didn't have to. The light was already at the right speed when it hit the telescope. You didn't have to tilt it. The Earth was stationary. So all of the experiments so far say that the Earth is stationary. It does not move. At the very least, that makes the universe geocentric, as in everything's got to revolve around the Earth, and or that the Earth is a flat stationary plane, which our observations and the spherical geometry tell us that it is. So there you go, scientific community. Prove me wrong. I think the Earth is a flat, stationary plane, and so far, all the experiments that I've seen have supported that 100%. So I hope you can come up with something. Have a great day.